So this week we're going to look at the second half of chapter 3A. It starts on page 12. Last week we looked at what happens when you do some marketing, when you find out what is needed in your area. This week we need to look at advertising because it doesn't really matter how much marketing survey or marketing research you do. If you don't advertise to the public, then they don't really know that you're there. And so as you read through this chapter, you work through this chapter, I want you to think about advertising and marketing and promotion all as a whole. For this week, your assignment, you're going to create a marketing plan. There is an outline in eLearn. You'll want to include a statement for each of those parts of the outline. Some of those will take a whole paragraph, some may not take quite as much. But I do want you to use the marketing research from last week in with your situational analysis. And so with that, let's get started.
As you develop a marketing plan, you have to have a section that deals with advertising and promotion. In that section, you want to include details about your overall goals. So perhaps you want to increase sales, or you want to develop customer loyalty. Maybe you want to increase your profit margin. So you want to specify whatever your goal is in the advertising and promotion section of a marketing plan. Then you want to make sure that those goals have measurable objectives. So if you want to increase sales, then one of your objectives may be to increase the number of customers. Or you may focus on increasing the average sale per customer. Or you may want to sell a specific number of a specific product. Whatever the case, you need to come up with goals and objectives that will help you determine what your advertising plan will be. If you're going to use paid advertising through traditional media outlets such as the newspaper, television, radio, then you usually want to have a good promotion in place to support that so that you can build some public relations and get some publicity so people are paying attention. You usually or typically want to keep this spending for advertising and promotion to around 5% of your sales. Some people go a little less, but if you reinvest about 5% of your sales, then you probably have the financial ability to do the adequate amount of advertising and promotion. So let's look at just advertising. Advertising is the process, or the goal of advertising is to get people into your business. That's all you're trying to do, get people in the door. So whether you're using the newspaper, TV, radio, internet, billboards, whatever the case may be, your goal in advertising is to get people in your door. So there are many forms of advertising. I'd like to address 6 here that your book addresses, and these are probably the most common forms of advertising, but in no way is this an all-inclusive list. First of all, there are newspaper ads, and I'm sure that we've all seen those, but you need to keep in mind what is the demographic of the people or the population that take the newspaper. For instance, I don't take the newspaper at my house. Occasionally I may buy a newspaper, but it's not something that I'll look at daily for news. So if your target population were people in my age bracket, you probably would not want to use the newspaper. If you do choose to make a newspaper ad, remember that there is value in white space. In other words, areas in the ad that have nothing but just white space or the color of the newspaper, because that white space denotes like a more upscale type of advertising. In other words, the less wording you have there, probably the better off you're going to be. Then there's what's called a Valpak, which comes through snail mail. Some people call this bulk mailing. In other words, a company prints up a bunch of postcards and sends them out to everyone in the community. So there is no specific name. You'll get it and it'll just say, excuse me, my email's popping up. So you may get this in the mail, back to the Valpak. You may get something in the mail and it'll just say current residents. This is called an interruption marketing scheme. You have not given So as we look at advertising, I'd like to look at 6 forms of advertising, and this is in no way an all-inclusive list, but these are probably the 6 most common forms of advertising. First of all, if we look at newspaper advertising, we have to consider the demographic information for the people who would receive the newspaper. Personally, I don't subscribe to a newspaper. Occasionally I might pick up a newspaper, or if I'm at someone's house I might read that newspaper, but it's not something that I subscribe to and get on a regular basis. So if I would fit your target population, the newspaper is probably not the best place for you to advertise. Then we have what's called Valpak, or some people call it bulk mailing. In this type of mailing, it's an interruption mailing because you have not given permission. You just get this postcard or letter in the mail from a company, and it's usually addressed to current resident, and they're giving you some kind of information about what they're doing or a sale that they're having, but it's not specifically sent to you, it's just sent to your house. So anyone who lived in that house would receive this mail regardless of whether or not you were there. This is different from email marketing or email advertising, because if you're going to use email advertising, it's a type of permission marketing. In other words, someone has given you their email address. Maybe you ask for it upon checkout. That's becoming a real popular thing. But there is no service that just says, hey, if you'll pay us, we'll send out an email to this huge group of people who have email, unless you have previously signed up for something that got you on that mailing list. So it's a little different than just receiving something in the mail. And as email becomes more popular, and as paper copies and postage continues to increase, email is becoming more and more popular as far as getting the word out to people. Then, of course, there are always radio advertisements. If you're going to do a radio advertisement, be sure that you repeat your message 3, maybe 4 or 5 times, because people don't see that. They're usually driving down the road. And if that's the case, then they need to hear the message over and over to make sure that they get the message. Or maybe they're at home cleaning or working in the garage. Whatever the case may be, you want to repeat that several times. If you decide to market or advertise via television, you're going to be competing with other noises that are going on in the house, because I don't know about you, but if I'm watching television and a commercial comes on, that's usually when I get up and go do whatever I need to do, go get my popcorn or go check email or whatever. You also want to consider the station that you'll advertise on, because not all people watch PBS. Some people do, and if that's your target market, then sure, you want to advertise there. But you have to be really careful when you use television marketing, because it is so expensive. You want to make sure that you're reaching your target market. And then finally, websites. A website these days for a business is almost essential. People seem to go to the web first thing before they even look anywhere else to get information. And you may only have a Facebook page, or you may have a Twitter account that you send out information from your business, and that may be enough just to create an account on social media when you start out. But as your business grows, you'll definitely want to invest in a good website. And let me just take a second here to encourage you to take an integrated advertising campaign approach. This means that you give the same message everywhere. The first thing that comes to mind for me is McDonald's and the I'm Loving It slogan. That slogan, I'm loving it, appears everywhere that they advertise. Another example would be Walmart, the blue sparkle. It seems to be on their advertisement papers that come in the mail. It's on the building. It's on your receipt. So that from the beginning to the end of the sale, from the time the person sees the advertisement until they make a purchase, they see that same advertising campaign. And this just promotes uniformity and eliminates confusion for people. If you remember at the beginning, I said that once you start an advertising plan, then you need to also add promotion. And a promotion just takes advertising one step further. If an advertisement's purpose is to get people into your business, the promotion is an activity that you do to put your advertising into motion. So perhaps you have special events. Maybe you make your business available for educational tours for children, or you have a senior citizens group come there, or you allow garden clubs to come. Another thing that has grown in popularity in recent years is agritourism, where some greenhouses have started aligning maybe a cornfield maze adjacent to the property, or they are having like paint a pumpkin and kids can come in and paint a pumpkin. Whatever the case may be, it's an event that's getting people to the business. You also want to get involved in your local community. So, maybe you can do things with the local Chamber of Commerce. I know some Chamber of Commerces have like decorate the street in the fall, or they have decorate a tree around Christmas time. And you want to be involved with those things. That way people see you actively involved, and it helps again with building public relations. Then the third thing here is create relationship with media outlets. If you think about it, there are opportunities for greenhouses to host radio stations. A lot of local radio stations are always looking for something to do. So as the spring time of the year comes around, you could always host a radio station there and have some information for people available about when to plant, what to plant, and then that always gets your name out in the public. Then finally, there's customer loyalty programs, and we know this best as value cards, but you don't have to have a computerized system to do this. Some companies, small businesses, do punch cards, the little business-sized cards that say, hey, if you spend $10 with us 10 times, we'll give you 10% off a purchase, or whatever you want to make that. But that's another type of promotion, just to re-emphasize the advertising and get people to come to your business. So let's take a look at retail sales and services, because advertising and promotion, we put those into place because we want people to make a sale or to make a purchase. So if we look at the beginning, most customers or most consumers arrive at a garden center without a plan. Research has shown that whenever consumers or customers come to a garden center, they don't really know what they want, and they're afraid they'll make a bad decision about plant materials. So the more information you can provide to those customers via signs or handouts or demonstrations or setups or your personal assistance, the more that you can increase their purchasing confidence, and they'll have a better success at home, which will probably result in them wanting to return to your greenhouse or your garden center because they know that they can get the help and support that they need. And that's, if you look at the second point here, the more information you can provide, the more pleasurable the experience. The third thing is you want to keep your greenhouse clean and attractive. You might want to provide places for people to sit. Maybe outside you have a demonstration area with a little pond and a swing, or maybe even inside the greenhouse. I went in a greenhouse one time where they had built flower walls with PVC pipes, and if you went into these little rooms that had flower walls, there was grass on the floor, and they had a picnic table with chairs that you could sit there and look at the plants or talk or whatever, and that might be a little excessive, but you want to keep things clean and attractive and have places for people to enjoy. You want to have a nice clean public restroom. You want to have wide walkways that will allow for wheelchairs or people to pass. You want to make sure that you have parking that is sufficient, enough parking space. You want it to be free of clutter. You want to have products on display. You just really want to make the gardening experience a good experience. You also want to provide educational materials, but you want those educational materials to be clear and concise. You might consider putting like a display garden up so that people can see, or have garden recipes that give people examples of plants that grow together well. And you can also use QR codes as we move forward with smartphones. These are called quick response codes, or short for QR codes, and they're the little square barcodes that people can use. And surveys have been conducted that found that almost 50% of buyers have accessed customer reviews online with a mobile device while in the store before they made a purchase. So having those QR codes available and having information about those plants available via QR code is really a good idea. Of course, you may be interested in doing wholesale sales and services as opposed to retail, or maybe you're going to do both. But if you're going to be in wholesale sales, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. You need to be in touch with the consumer demands. Just because you won't be selling to the public doesn't mean that you don't need to provide what the public is interested in. So be sure that you still continue to do those marketing researches and to find out what the consumer is after. You want to educate the retailer. Tell them what it is that you have. Tell them what is so good about your product. Give them any information that you can to help them sell the product, because you need to remember, as the fourth point here says, more retail sales mean more wholesale sales. The third point is training. A lot of wholesale sellers will offer training to their retailers, and that training could be on anything that is relevant at that time. But it's just kind of a nice way to get the retail sellers into your business and get them to sign with you. I know that I worked at a greenhouse once, and we were a retail seller, and the wholesaler actually came to our place, and they brought food, and they invited all the greenhouse growers in the area to come to our place, and then they tried to sign on these other people as retail sellers for the product. If you are a wholesaler, you may want to have a product display or help the retailer set up their product display. You might want to provide the tables for that. And then finally, you'll probably need to provide some kind of financial services for retailers, because retailers probably are not going to have the money to pay you for this massive quantity of plants that they're going to buy up front. So you'll probably have to have some kind of credit line available. Then we look at pricing, and there's another chapter that deals with cost, but I just want to touch on this very briefly. Keep in mind that prices are determined by the market conditions and competition, but also need to reflect your cost. So, for example, if you had a 1% increase in the selling price of a flat of bedding plants, that will increase your profit by 16%. But if you had a 10% increase in the selling price of the flat, that would increase your profit by 160%. So you need to keep that in mind whenever you are determining your cost or your price to the public. And then you'll see in the box at the below, gross margin pricing is based on the selling price. It uses the business's income statement to add a percentage margin that allows the operator to reach his profit objectives. So whatever you wanted to reach, if you wanted to reach a 5% profit or 10% profit. This method accounts for fixed cost and the desired profit margin. Markup pricing is an add-on to the cost of the product to determine the selling price. And then you see here markup pricing, and I just stated it's an add-on to the cost of the product. If the product has a unique value, there's not a close substitution, or it's difficult to compare to another competitor's product, you can usually charge a higher price. But you may need the input of an accountant to establish this part of your business plan as far as what will be your profit markup.